And welcome once again to Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr, along with, as always, our national security consultant, Juan Zarate. Juan, good to see you.
Bob, great to see you.
Well, it's been a blockbuster week for news. Word came earlier this week about this plot emanating from Iran, targeting the Saudi ambassador in this country, and it involved apparently a Mexican drug cartel. You can't make that up. That's quite a scenario.
It reads like a novel. It's so extraordinary and unbelievable, and so brazen and shockingly sloppy on the part of the Iranians that it's almost unbelievable, Bob. But I think what is fascinating here is what this plot reveals. You know, the Quds Force is the external arm of the Iranian military. They were plotting to attack and to kill the Saudi ambassador here in the U.S., Adel al-Jubeir, somebody I know well, somebody who's known well in Washington circles as being a key confidant to the King of Saudi Arabia, also a key interlocutor between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. So a real step function difference for the Quds Force to start to attack in the U.S., to attack a figure who is so well recognized. And we know that the Quds Force has done quite a bit of terrorist damage in the past with attacks not just in Iraq and Afghanistan recently, but also in the past in places like Argentina, with 2 attacks there in Buenos Aires with devastating effect, and assassinations in the past as well of Saudi diplomats in Thailand in 1990. And we know that David Belfield, an American citizen, killed an Iranian dissident here in 1980, here in Washington, D.C. And so this isn't out of the ordinary, but what is interesting here is that it's a step function difference in terms of the type of plot and the fact that they're willing to do it in the United States at a time of increasing tension in the region.
Let's break it down a little bit more. This plot, I think, almost universally is being regarded as somewhat ham-handed, a little bit sloppy. You have this guy from Texas who apparently knows someone, is related to someone in the Quds Force, and he's tasked with finding a hitman, and he stumbles across a DEA informant. The Iranian terror outreach program is a little bit better than that.
Yeah, I mean, we know that the Quds Force is one of the best professional terrorist units in the world. You know, they've done it from Lebanon to Argentina, as we just said. So this is surprising that they would not only outsource this kind of an operation, but outsource the kind of operation that this represents, which is such a serious attack on a regional rival in Saudi Arabia, a very clear attack on Saudi Arabia, but also doing it in the heart of America's political power, with consequences likely to kill American civilians, and would be seen as an act of war if this had actually happened. So the fact that they would outsource it in such a sloppy way and would try to go fishing in Mexico for assassins, when they've got lots of trained assassins, when they've got lots of experience in attacking abroad, really is a shocking, sort of sloppy manifestation of the threat. Now, that said, American officials are very definitive that this goes to the highest levels, to Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force, the external arm of the Revolutionary Guard for the Iranians, and that this was really directed by them. So, albeit sloppy, this was coming from Iran and certainly was intended to have a desired impact here in Washington.
If the Iranians wanted to put out a hit on their rival, in this case, the ambassador, your friend, al-Jubeir, they could hit him somewhere else. But they purposely set out a plot, according to the court documents, to target him in this country. Now, what's the significance of that?
Well, here they're trying to send a dual message. And we've known from how the Iranians and how some of their proxies like Hezbollah have operated in the past that they often like to hit targets, but to do it in symbolic environments where it would have multiple strategic impact. And so, for example, the LA Times revealed that there was a Hezbollah attack planned in Azerbaijan just a couple of years ago. That was intended not just to hit Israeli targets, but to also hit the Azerbaijanis who were countering Iranian influence. And so, in trying to hit a target that is so symbolic, so important, like Adel al-Jubeir, the Saudi ambassador, but doing it in Washington, it was intended to send a dual signal. That is to say, we're going to hit our rival in the region, Saudi Arabia, but we're also going to cross the line and attack in the United States. And that's what makes this so significant. The fact that the Iranians were willing to confront the United States and the Saudis so directly. And I don't think anyone thinks that sort of the way this plot was unfolding with the use of Mexicans, that would have really covered the nature of this. Everyone would have figured out that this was the Iranians at some point. And so the Iranians were making a calculated judgment here of confrontation with both Saudi Arabia and the United States. It's revelatory in two ways, Bob. One, it shows and reveals yet again something we've talked about here in Flashpoints, that there is an ongoing proxy war, a shadow war between Saudi Arabia and Iran via their proxies. This is the North American manifestation of it, kind of the French and Indian War version of the proxy battle happening. But it's underway now. It's underway in Iraq. It's underway in Bahrain. It's underway in Yemen. It's underway in Syria, Lebanon. We're seeing it throughout the region that there's this competition for influence and power through proxies between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The Persian Shia leader and the Sunni Arabian leader in the region. And that is only going to get more tense as a result of this. The other thing that's revealing here is Iran was willing, at least a portion of the government here, the Quds Force, was willing to cross the red line and plot something against the United States. That says something about their willingness to take a chance here and a risk, and their sense of what the consequences may or may not be in response.
And the last point before we move to the second topic, what does it say, if anything, about a potential internal problem in the Iranian government? Because here you have the Quds Force. If it's signed off at the highest level, it kind of begs the question, would the clerics have approved that? Would they have known that? And where does President Ahmadinejad fit into this?
Well, again, we've talked about this at length on Flashpoints, and we talked about it in terms of this corruption scandal internally within Iran. There is an internal battle within Iran. There's a fracturing between the clerical conservative leadership led by the Supreme Leader Khamenei and President Ahmadinejad, who in some ways represents a more moderate wing, if people can believe that. The Quds Force responds and reports to the Supreme Leader, Khamenei. And something of this nature, this kind of a plot, would certainly, at least based on our assumptions of the leadership, would have gotten the blessing from the Supreme Leader himself. And so there's a question as to how this kind of a plot plays into the internal dynamics and fracturing of leadership within Iran. Was this meant to undercut President Ahmadinejad? Was this meant to undercut some of the signals sent about willingness to talk on the nuclear issue? It's unclear, but certainly this is part of the three-dimensional chess of the region and the internal dynamics of Iran. And I don't think yet we have any clarity as to how this is playing out internally in Iran, but it certainly will in the coming days.